We'll get back to the presentation for a while, then we'll address some more of your questions, everyone, just so you know. Go ahead.
Okay, so the logs on this slides are based on the IP addresses over here. But then once we have discussed how the logs will look like, we'll log into our firewall and the GlobalProtect application on my test machine, and then we'll correlate how the logs will actually look. So generally, when we are merging PAN GPS and GPA logs with debug of the firewall or the logs, somebody have a question related how you can view the OD logs or how you can debug the OD log. I'll talk about that shortly. So when the users try to connect to the portal, will under the PAN GPS log, you will be able to see logs like portal pre-login starts, and as it's a portal connection, you will see URL globalprotect pre-login.esp. When we talk about gateway, the URL is SSL VPN. So here you can differentiate when you're going to the GP logs. If you want to see when the portal login starts, you can filter out the PAN GPS log with portal pre-login start and then go through the logs. So this URL globalprotect pre-login ESP means it's portal authentication. When the user is trying to authenticate to the portal on the firewall, in the auth logs, we will see PAN auth request SAML create SSO request. So this means the firewall is creating an SSO request, and then below you will see the SAML ACS URL and the IDP URL where the client will be redirected. Okay, so if you see here, ACS consumer service URL, sorry, this is the ACS URL over here, and this is the destination, that's the IDP URL. Under PAN GPS, you will see SAML requests, and when the client is redirected to the IDP for authentication, user needs to insert his credential on the web page. So this you can view on the GP logs. Okay, I forgot to mention, when I talk about PAN GPS or PAN GPA, these are the GlobalProtect application logs. When I'm talking about ODD, this is the log present on the firewall. So PAN GPS and PAN GPA log, you can filter out by extracting the logs from the GP application, and ODD log, you can review it to the CLI of the firewall. So if you remember the flow, GP uses TLS connection to connect to the portal or gateway, pre-login ESP message. So this is the portal pre-login ESP. Then if I go back, browser starts a new TLS connection with IDP. So this will happen once the firewall sends the redirect IDP URL to the GP client. So firewall sends that information to the GP client, then GP client know which IDP to reach out to so that the user can get authenticated. You will get information about client IP and further username in the OD logs as well. So when the client is redirected to the IDP for authentication, he has to insert his credential. So you will see something like, if you're using embedded browser, you will see show page using embedded browser and the page URL navigated to the IDP URL. There will be an HTML pop-up, potential, the SAML authentication login page. So how that pop-up will look like, if I go back and try to log in, so this is the HTML pop-up where I'm asked to enter my username and password. So user needs to insert his credential on the web page. You want to see the log under PAN GPA, you can see this log where a pop-up is happening. So suppose when you're troubleshooting and you're not able to see that pop-up page. Okay, when you're not able to see the pop-up page, you can verify the logs in PAN-GPA and see these kinds of log getting generated or not. If these kinds of logs are getting generated, that means application is actually trying to generate that pop-up page. However, there is something else that is blocking. That could be an issue on the Windows side. But if you're not able to see these logs, that means it never went for the IDP redirection. So IDP returns a SAML assertion and redirects browser to the GP portal. So when we talk about SAML assertion, which is returned by IDP, that is when a GP application will use the browser to submit information to the firewall, and it will be on this URL. So in our Okta IDP, here it is. Sorry, I have to sign in. Okay, so this is my SAML ACS URL 10.10.10.1. This is actually my firewall's interface IP where I have deployed GP 1/1 and 1/1 is configured with IP 10.10.10.1. All right. So as per the flow, we have seen the logs when GP is using a TLS connection to connect to portal or gateway. We do see a post pre-login ESP message. In the ODD logs, we're able to see SSO requests getting generated and a redirect URL getting generated so that the client can be redirected to the IDP. Once the client is redirected, you will see these kinds of messages redirected to this. This is the client IP. And once redirection is successful, under the PAN-GPA log, we'll see an embedded browser and a pop-up page to log in user's credential with username and password. And then once it is authenticated successfully, IDP returns a SAML assertion, and this is the SAML assertion URL. So if we have to go to the flow, we saw GP using a TLS connection to connect to portal and gateway. Right now, we are specifically talking about portal. Firewall responds with a SAML redirect. This we have seen in ODD logs on the firewall. Then browser starts a new TLS connection with IDP. If you want to see the TLS connection, you can run a packet capture simultaneously when you're logging on the GP client. Here you will see a separate SSL connection to the IDP URL. IDP validates the client credential and sends a result in the SAML assertion payload along with the redirect message, sending the browser back to the portal ACS URL. So the portal ACS URL, this is the URL. Once IDP has validated, it sends the client back this URL. Now, once it is received, browser will start a separate connection to the ACS URL and submits SAML assertion. So next log we'll be able to see under ODD. So firewall validates the assertion and returns the username and pre-login cookie to the client. So under ODD, we will see PAN, auth, RIC, SAML, pass, SSO response. Here we will see got attribute name, the username, and the value as well. So this is being shared by IDP, and then GP is sharing it to the firewall. SAML assertion signature is validated against IDP. And then once it is successful, we'll be able to see sent PAN auth success SAML message. Okay, this means SAML authentication was successful. Till here, we are only talking about portal authentication. Once portal is authenticated, then only a gateway authentication will take place. So why portal authentication is important? Because once user is authenticated to the portal, it is going to grab the config from the portal that is actually a gateway config. If you have only one gateway, we'll get that single gateway configuration from the portal, and then a gateway connection will be established on that IP address. If there are multiple gateways, we'll have the multiple gateway, and on the basis of the best distance, it will try to connect to the best available gateway. Do you have roster limit? Okay, let's go further. So here, what we have seen that portal authentication successful. Now, once portal authentication is successful, we will have config from the portal to the client, and then a gateway configuration, gateway authentication will start. So client resumes the session using the pre-login cookie. Under the PAN GPA log, you can see the pre-login cookie. This is the pre-login cookie. If you want to search, you can search with the keyword pre-login hyphen cookie. Then under the PAN GPS log, you will see getconfig.esp. That means the client or GP application is trying to gather the configuration from the portal. Once we see getconfig.esp, that means it is trying to gather gateway configuration from the portal. Once it has gathered that information, a gateway pre-login will start or gateway authentication will start. If you remember, under portal, it was GlobalProtect slash pre-login ESP. When we talk about gateway, it's SSL hyphen VPN slash pre-login.esp. That means this is the gateway authentication taking place. Now, sorry. Now, when we talk about gateway authentication, as I'm using SAML for gateway authentication as well, the application will follow the same process as portal to authenticate to the IDP. So we will have something similar log messages, like under auth, we'll see another pan auth request SAML create SSO request. We will see the FQDN information. We will see the session URL and the destination, that's the IDP URL where the client will be redirected. Then at the bottom, we'll see a client redirect message. You can see a client IP address this, redirected to this IDP URL for authentication profile, whichever I'm using in my configuration. Under PAN GPS, we will see SAML request. Then when the client is redirected for authentication user, second time user don't need to insert this credential as a valid cookie is presented to IDP. You can see a HTML pop-up potential. The SAML authentication login page is no longer present, or the log is not present because we are not entering the username password on another pop-up page because we have a pre-login cookie. Then IDP will return the SAML assertion and redirect the browser to the GP portal ACS URL. Why I've written GP portal ACS URL? Because I have used only one IP address in my config. So it is returning into the same IP address. So if I go back to the flow, so we know when we went through the portal authentication, IDP validated the client credentials and sent us back the SAML accession payload with the ACS URL. Now browsers will start a separate connection towards the portal ACS URL and submit SAML assertion. Okay, this was done for portal. Now portal was authenticated and then GP application got the config from the portal. So when it has taken the config from the portal, it will initiate a gateway authentication. So gateway authentication will use the same process like GP uses TLS to connect to the gateway. Here, pre-login ESP, that is SSL VPN slash pre-login ESP message. Firewall again redirects the user to the IDP. IDP will validate the client credentials and sends the result in SAML accession payload along with the redirect message, sending the browser back to the gateway ACS URL. In my lab or in this logs, the gateway and portal ACS URL is same. Firewall will validate the ACS information received from the client. Once it is validated, with the help of pre-login cookie, the user will be able to resume session. or the GP will be able to resume the session, and it will use the SAML pre-login cookie to authenticate itself. So in our case, we notice two authentication, one for portal and one for gateway. Both are using SAML. We notice how the logs will look like for portal authentication on the GP app, and you can see the logs under PAN GPS. How the log will look like for gateway authentication GP app. You can see it in PAN GPS. The difference between portal and gateway, we will see a URL in the portal that is globalprotect/prelogin.esp. And when we talk about gateway, the URL is sslvpn/prelogin.esp. That's how you can differentiate what's the connection for portal and what is the connection for the gateway when you're troubleshooting Global Protect authentication related issues. If you want to verify whether there is a successful authentication happening, you should always go to the firewall and check the authentication logs or the auth logs. You will filter out for the pan auth ric SAML create SSO keyword. Here, when it will be generated when the firewall initiate a SSO request, you should be able to see firewall successfully sending client or redirecting the client to the IDP URL, and we should be also be able to see the SAML ACS URL over here. If we are not able to see, that means authentication is not successfully happening on the firewall. There could be any issue. Most of the time, when we talk about this, there are some issues related to your config. So we saw in the second attempt, we don't see a pop-up message because it is using the pre-login cookie to log in to the GP. And in that case, we are not entering the username and password. So we don't see that HTML pop-up again. Second time also for gateway authentication, we will see SAML authentication. We know how the firewall, the keywords when the firewall generates SAML SSO and then redirects the user to the IDP. But then when it gets successful, we will see keyword like PAN or success. That means SAML authentication is successful. So if you want to view the logs on the GUI itself, you can view it under Global Protect Monitor Logs. You can see here, this is highlighted for a SAML authentication. If you see, it's bottom up. So first portal pre-login, then portal auth, then portal get config, then gateway pre-login and gateway authentication. On the right, you can see authentication method as SAML. When you're troubleshooting and we are not sure whether it is using SAML or cookies, you can see authentication method. If it is SAML, that means it is using SAML to authenticate. If it is something else, that means it is not using SAML to authenticate. So we can instantaneously check if authentication fails at the portal pre-login stage or the gateway pre-login stage. As authentication override cookie can also be used in conjunction with SAML authentication, we can see if user is authenticated through SAML or cookie. So under system logs, you can also verify information about authentication success events. So on top, you can see there's an auth success event. The object is auth SAML. So you can filter out with this event or with this object under system logs, and you can see under description, SAML SSO authenticated for user this, auth profile this, and server profile, whatever the server profile configured on the firewall. So let's see if I have any log right now on the firewall. Let me try to connect. So when we are talking about OD logs, similar logs we can see on the firewall. Here you notice when I try to log in on my GP client, you see a SAML client redirect. This is the client. My client IP is 10.10.10.10. It is redirected to this SAML URL. And what this is the auth profile I configured. So this URL is being taken from this auth profile because this auth profile is being called in the portal itself. Then the next log, SAML IDP activity, receive SAML assertion from this, SAML signature validated, SAML assertion signature validated against IDP certificate. Then when we are talking about authentication success, so Parmar, what's the question? Management plane or data plane? What do you mean by that? Management plane or data plane? Can you explain your question? So here, let's go further. So authentication success. So SAML authenticated for user. This is my username, gpuser@gplab.com. I'm using GP auth profile. This is the server profile. That's the IDP configuration. And this is the IDP URL. Okay. And then why we are seeing again SAML client redirect, signature validated and not success. This we are seeing because it is also doing a gateway authentication. And this is the second part where the gateway authentication takes place. So similar logs, because we are using SAML for both portal and gateway authentication. If we want to see logs for GlobalProtect, we can go under Monitor, GlobalProtect. So what 1855, I started portal pre-login. Login was successful for this user. Configuration, then again a login. And then here, once like a gateway login is successful, a tunnel is initiated and then it is connected. And then it is connected via tunnel. Once the tunnel is initiated, we'll get that host information from the GP app. So you can obviously view the logs through the OD logs, or sorry, the system logs on the GUI and GP monitor logs as well. If you're not comfortable going through the authentication logs on the CLI, sometimes there are a lot of cases where the users which are actually troubleshooting, they may not have full access on the firewall. They have the GUI access, but not the CLI access, and they need to view whether there's a successful authentication happening or not. They can definitely go through the system logs and GP monitor logs to see whether a successful authentication happening or not. If there are some errors, we can obviously see those errors under the system logs and under GP monitor logs as well. Most relevant OD logs errors are also under the monitor system logs. Okay. Let's take a short 10-minute break and then we'll continue. We'll talk about the best practice, and then whatever we were talking about the logs which we're seeing on the OD on the GP lab, we'll actually demonstrate on the lab system and see how the logs will look like and how you can filter it with using the keywords which I showed you in the presentation.
Okay, that sounds great. Ladies and gentlemen, I have us at basically at the top of the hour, so we will come back at 10 after. We've got some great questions going on the chat, so keep them coming in. We will get to them as we can. Yeah, any questions, any clarification or whatnot, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see y'all in 10 minutes. Thank you. Bye.